Good morning, everyone. Been looking forward to that. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Amy Wilborn, and I am delighted to serve as your worship associate today and welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, your spirit. We welcome all you are bringing with you today, and all your heart longs to set down. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. Guests may also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary, where folks will also find hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals. A fragrance-free area is located on the front right side in the first few pews. If you are a visiting family with children or youth, after the time for all ages, noted in your order of service, please join the children's recessional and head across to the common room. There you'll be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. Again, my name is Amy Wilborn, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to a few. Our forum speaker this morning is Kathleen Dunn, The Making of a Therapy Dog. Also, join First Church members for Micah's annual meeting this Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. at Bayshore Lutheran Church. This inspiring, high-energy event is our yearly opportunity to stand with our inner city congregation partners and remind our political leaders that Milwaukee's racial justice issues matter. For more information or to connect to the event, see Pete Konechny at First Coffee Hour or email him. The chronologically gifted group's October potluck is next Sunday, October 27th. As usual, please bring a dish to share and join us in Max Otto Hall at 12:30 p.m. after the second service. Miss Julie's Music for Fun for early childhood families, parents, grandparents, nannies, aunts, uncles, bring your wee ones, ages 1 to 5, to explore music, rhythm, music, finger plays, and songs with Julie Thompson from 10 to 10:45 a.m. on Thursdays in November and early December. Register early, either online or at the religious table, so we can meet minimum enrollment to launch this class. Please find details on these and more events in the announcements insert. Finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. I'd like to invite Patrick Mulvey up to light the chalice.
Our opening words this morning are by Norman Fisher. To practice forbearance is to appreciate and celebrate the heart's vulnerability, and to see that the slicing or the piercing of the heart does not require defense, that the heart's vulnerability is a good thing, because wounds can make us more peaceful and more real, if, that is, we are willing to hang on to the leopard of our fear, the serpent of our grief, the boar of our shame, without running away or being hurled off. Forbearance is simply holding on steadfastly with whatever it is that unexpectedly arises, not doing anything, not fixing anything, because doing and fixing can be a way to cover up the heart, to leap over the hurt and pain by occupying ourselves with schemes and plans to get rid of it. just holding on for dear life. Holding on with what comes is what makes life dear. Will you please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 100. We'll sing verses 1 through 4 and then verse 6 of I've Got Peace Like a River. My friends, we have the delight this morning of getting to celebrate Reverend Dena MePhetres' 10 years of service to this congregation. Now, to be clear, Reverend Dena has actually served more than 10 years at this point, since she began serving this congregation on August 1st of 2009. And before she joined us, she had served for 10 years at a congregation in New Hampshire, and 2 years before that, she served at congregations in Minnesota. So you all called Reverend Dena to be your first ever called associate minister in May of 2009, and your first ever settled female minister in 2009. She's been a stable ministerial presence with you through the transition, including serving as bridge minister when your interim senior minister, Reverend Elaine Parashula, departed 4 months early, and I am so lucky and delighted to be able to serve with her now today. Dena has led our pastoral care program into the supportive and transformative witness it currently is. Along with lay leaders Lori Peterson and Pete Newwald, she developed the current robust pastoral care associate training program. She supported the formation of the memorial service reception team and the shawl ministry. Reverend Dena recently revamped our small group ministry program with the creation of theme circles. She's also dramatically deepened our summer services experience, working one-on-one to coach members on their summer sermons, as well as delivering her own. She's also developed some of our most artistic and dearly loved worship services: the chanting service, the Tenebrae service, the winter solstice service, the coming out day and pride day services. In her work with social justice, she's supported leaders who started new action groups, from Common Ground to escalating inequality to immigration issues. Working with Nancy Pieski, Dena started the Share the Plate program here at church. And working with Lisa Geis, Dena formed the 57K task force to give away 10% of the McLaughlin bequest on social justice initiatives. And Reverend Dena created our first ever social justice intern position, hiring and supervising Claire Keys last year. Dena has been a transformative presence in this congregation for more than 10 years, witnessing you and supporting you and challenging you, and most of all, loving you. We're lucky that she's been here to share her ministry with us. To share some of the testimonials of lay leaders in our congregation, I'd like to invite up Robert Szymanski, as well as Joanne Bishop and Lisa Konezny.
These are for you, Dena.
Thanks.
Each one, namaste. Sharon Depew. I've had the unique opportunity to interact with Dena around a very sensitive area, death, and how we deal with the deaths of beloved members of our community. Dena has set a standard for sensitive and loving recognition of the loss to our community, of the very personal loss to friends and family, and of the natural progression of life to death for all of us. From Candace Haight. Dena has been a consistent resource and strong advocate in my journey to pursue my spiritual direction calling, and share my spiritual practices. I have also had the opportunity to work with Dena in church matters. Her integrity and respect and compassion, both for self and others, are guiding principles. And her laughter is contagious. She's a mentor and a friend. May we be blessed to have her for another 10 years. From Nancy Spranzi. Dena is a steady, calm presence in our church community. She shares thoughtful sermons and leads small groups with carefully planned procedures. She is sensitive to our personal issues, yet is always ready to laugh at just the appropriate moment. From Sally Lewis. It was near the end of our 2 years of transition and search after Drew retired. I was on the board. When our transition minister unexpectedly left her job several months early, the board turned to Dena to cover the gap. At the board's request, Dena stepped up and took on many senior minister duties on top of her associate minister duties and put out extraordinary effort to keep everything running smoothly. And her wonderful sense of humor helped carry her along. I still remember the evening she reported to the FUSM board at the conclusion of her 4 or so months as bridge minister. She began her report, "At last we have crossed the bridge. No one fell off, and no one jumped off the bridge." Liz Irwin. I chaired the search committee that eventually brought Dena to our congregation. It's hard to believe we started our work 11 years ago. My first impressions of Dena included warmth, openness, sense of humor, and clear communication. In writing, in conversation, and from the pulpit. All these impressions have been validated many times. I am so glad we chose Dena, and she chose us. From Paul Kozadowski. I worked with Dena on the pulpit guest committee for 2 years and remember most her presence at the meetings. There were often contingency plans, last-minute changes, and challenges to select and contact ministers for the church year. At these meetings, Dena's presence was a welcome combination of efficiency expert and Zen master. Her sense of calm resolve and good humor always made the work a pleasure. And from Lori Peterson. I have worked closely with Dena for over 6 years with the Pastoral Care Associates. She is amazing, and she is an amazing and delightful person to work with, and I've learned so much from her. Dena is a wonderful role model for our PCAs as they go out and offer a quiet, listening presence to the members of our congregation during times of need and joy. She is so compassionate and is not afraid to allow herself to be vulnerable in our circle. Her zany and easy sense of humor is powerful and keeps us all engaged. I'm delighted to be able to work with Dena for years to come. How blessed we are to have Dena with us on our journey. And I'll add my own. A simple thank you and namaste.
Well, Dena, I'm one of the lucky people who got to know you a little longer than everybody else because I was on Dena's search committee. And thrilled to be able to help with this celebration. And it's a celebration that'll go longer than service today. You're going to be able to take home flowers that were donated for you, and there's going to be treats and coffee hour, and we have a card, which you probably peeked at during coffee hour in the past few Sundays, for people to just put their well wishes on. It'll be up here after service, so if you miss the opportunity, you can add to it. When we were thinking about what to present to you in recognition for this, I remembered when we were spending your candidate week together, we had several opportunities to look for housing for you when when you would relocate here and that. And you mentioned gardening. You weren't going to be in an apartment. You needed a place where you could get your fingers a little dirty. So we came up with an idea for your garden. And then last week when Kimberly shared the story about everyone needs a rock, I was like, oh my gosh, how did she know? Until she got to the point where she said, everybody's rock needs to fit in their pocket. And come on up, you're getting a rock, but it's not going to fit in your pocket.
Oh my goodness.
Just take off the lid, it's heavy.
It's wrapped in tissue paper. It has words on it.
And Joanne's getting her workout.
Thank you so much. That's great.
It says, in gratitude for nurturing our spirit, FUSM 2009 to 2019.
I will plant it carefully.
I want to also thank so many members of the congregation have donated treats for today, so stop in the coffee hour and enjoy a snack in honor of Dena.
All right, Dena, will you stand in front of the pulpit for me, please? So, ministers often give blessings. That's part of our job, and Dena has blessed this community again and again with her hands and her heart. And it's our turn to bless Dena and for her to receive a blessing. So, Dena, go ahead and face the congregation. Congregation, ours is an embodied faith, and it finds the sacred through our voice and through our hands. Laying on of hands ceremonies are circles of healing and blessing that remind us that we are not alone and that we are companioned through life by our community. So those who are up in the balcony right now, I would like to invite you to begin your journey down so that you can participate in our laying on of hands ceremony. Dena, this congregation would like to bless you as you have blessed us. We invite you to receive our blessing and to be held in trust by the touch of our hands. So the first circle that has companioned Dena most closely on her journey, I'd like to invite up Dena's family and the search committee that called Dena to us, and anyone who has served on Dena's committee on ministry over the last 10 plus years. And for our second circle, I'd like you to find somebody, a shoulder or an arm, and touch someone who is touching Dena and send your blessing through them to Dena. In our second circle, I'd like to invite up any team members in Dena's program areas over the years. So that's pastoral care, chalice circle facilitators and theme circle facilitators, the social justice council, the pulpit guest team, and the adult spiritual development team, and the staff team. And our third circle is everyone. So please rise and come forward and find a shoulder or an arm. Touch someone who is touching someone who is touching Dena. During our ritual, we're going to be singing, "May I be filled with loving kindness." The words to that are, "May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole." In verse 2, we'll switch I with the word you. Verse 3, I with we. And Dan Dance is going to lead us on our way. Dan?
Thank you, Jennifer. Just follow me, folks. It's going to be easy. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Dena, as you receive this energy, know that you're loved. Know that you carry this blessing of the community forward with you into your next 10 years. Friends, you can slowly release your hands. At this time, I'm going to invite our children, our youth, and our teachers to exit and meet in the common room while the rest of the congregation returns to its seats. May you be well. May you be whole. I'd like to invite you to join in a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So tune into your breath. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. May we be held in all our vulnerability in this community. May we know it is okay to be human, to be imperfect, to be whole. May we know that we are worthy of love, connection, and belonging. And in knowing that, may we give love, connection, and belonging to others. May it be so.
My life has been one long quest for belonging. It's something I've always struggled with. This quest took a harsh turn for me in the summer of 2018 when I entered the Aurora Dewey Treatment Center to detox from alcohol. None of my family or friends knew that I had a drinking problem, and only my sons and one close friend knew where I was going. Shame had been my hiding place. I was not at all prepared for what lay ahead of me in the hospital. My phone was immediately taken away, along with most of my belongings. I was strip searched and left alone in a sparsely furnished room while people of all ages and walks of life were milling about in the hallways. Some looked like they'd been ripped out of a trauma, while others looked like they had lived there for months. I was cut off from the rest of the world, and I had never felt so alone in my life. Thankfully, I had brought the copy of my book, Life Without Pockets, written by my dear friend Carla Ernst. The book was distinctly in her voice and sprinkled with her unique brand of humor. Her words comforted me, and it was like she was there with me. Shortly after finishing it, I gained the courage to enter the chaos outside my door and to begin my journey to recovery. I'd been in the hospital for 3 days, and after I was released, I faced the real challenges of being sober. I was flooded with emotions. Paralyzed by this new tide, I struggled to face a conflict with a very close friend, and instead avoided it. That friendship ended, and in a series of cascading events, I lost the support of that entire friend group. I was also no longer being invited to Wine Wednesdays, Girls' Weekends, and other drinking-centered gatherings. Even when I was, I lacked the desire to participate in them. I hit an emotional low and lost trust in people. I stumbled to find my footing in a sober life where the rest of the world celebrated alcohol. I wondered how I could possibly feel that I belonged without it. The one place I could be myself without feeling stigmatized was this church. I had always been an involved member, but I began to throw myself into everything I could: theme circle, Feast for Funds events, geography of grace, circle suppers, and even served on a committee. It was through sharing pieces of my story in small groups and making myself vulnerable that I began to develop a true sense of belonging. In the safety of those small groups, I was able to slowly open up and allow new and renewed connections to grow. In hearing others share their pain, I also felt less alone. The faces that I had become accustomed to seeing in coffee hour became full, developed souls who I now felt connected to through our shared joy and suffering. Ironically, it turns out that the very thing I thought helped me connect with others was the very thing that was preventing me from experiencing belonging. Alcohol was a mask I had not been fully conscious I'd been wearing. On the day that I was released from the hospital, I saw Carla walking down the street near her home. I swung my car around and picked her up. We sat in front of her apartment where I shared my story with her, why I was hospitalized, and what her book had meant to me during my stay. I told her something else. You see, when I got to the end of Carla's book and read the acknowledgments I found by name, it was evidence to me in that moment that I belonged to at least one person. It's what moved me from isolation to connection. After Carla recovered from the shock of learning of my addiction, yes, Carla was actually rendered speechless for a moment. She asked me if it was okay if she told me she loved me. I said yes and told her I loved her too. Then we held each other, just as we all continue to hold each other here.
had a classmate in seminary who was one of the most unhappy people I had ever met. She was extremely critical of everything around her, the structure of our courses, the things that we were learning, the people in class with her. She even hated our parking lot. Now, to be fair, the parking lot was very small and quite challenging. But still, in my final year of seminary, I took a leadership course that promised to make us deeper and more authentic leaders. The course was strangely set up. There were a few books on the syllabus, but not that many. And most of grad school had required more reading than it was even possible to do in a day. This course had 4 books on it, 4. Most of the coursework was reflective listening in pairs, individual reflection in a journal, and then groups of witnessing one another in circles. I found it to be an odd setup, but I trusted the person who had organized the course, and the teacher impressed me, so I signed up. Unfortunately, my grumpy classmate also signed up for this course. I was particularly annoyed because it seemed like this class was going to involve a lot of feelings. And I wasn't going to be able to hide from her in an intellectual argument. The class was designed to encourage vulnerability. And I was nervous to expose my own vulnerability to this woman's constant criticism, afraid to open my heart in tenderness around her anger and her judgment. When I ask our church members about the most powerful moment in their own individual histories with the church, I consistently hear one of 3 stories: a social justice story, a weathering conflict in a healthy way story, or a story of being held in vulnerability. That 3rd one, the vulnerability story, is the one that consistently brings people to tears. It's a story of the community showing up in illness or death or loss. It's a story of finally being able to be one's true self and then being welcomed in that authenticity. It's a story of being able to be loved even in perfection, even in imperfection, in failure, or in suffering. Now, I've told you before, and I will tell you again, you all are an impressive people. You work hard, you do your research, you do your best, and your best is very good. There are so many benefits to this level of excellence that you bring, but there are downsides too. Vulnerability isn't easy ever, and it's particularly not easy in a culture that reaches for perfection. In one of our congregation's small groups, a member shared her fear that she wouldn't be accepted here if she didn't have everything in her life totally together. Could she show up if she was struggling? Could she go into coffee hour and admit that some of the things in her life weren't going well? In grounded theory researcher Brené Brown's investigation into vulnerability, Brown interviewed hundreds of people and gathered 11,000 pieces of data about vulnerability and what makes a person experience belonging. In her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, Brown found that she could divide people into 2 categories: people who had a deep sense of connection and belonging, and people who struggled to find connection and belonging. She searched through those 11,000 pieces of data for the primary difference between the 2 groups. And she found and this is disappointing, I'm sorry to tell you this, she found that the primary difference between group 1 and group 2 is that the people who experienced a deep connection and belonging believed that they were worthy of it. And the second group struggled to believe that they were worthy of it. Initially, Brown assumed that the first group, the folks who believed that they were worthy of belonging, had just had an easier life, that they had had better childhoods and less suffering and more love and acceptance from parents and family and friends. But when she looked at that data, that was not the pattern that showed up. The people who believed that they were worthy and those who struggled to believe that they were worthy had the same rates of trauma and divorce and alienation and oppression. The difference between the two lists was that the people on the first list, the ones who believed they were worthy, had the courage to be imperfect. They had compassion with themselves first and then with other people. And they built their connections from authenticity and vulnerability instead of perfection. The people who were on the list who struggled with worthiness tended to numb their feelings of vulnerability. They pushed themselves to be perfect. They had high levels of certainty and of judgment. They used blame as a tool to discharge their fear. And they pretended that their actions did not have an effect on the people around them. When Brown looked at the two lists, she realized she fell squarely on the second list. She sought perfection in her life and in her family and in her work. She had even gotten into research in the first place as a way to manage and control vulnerability. In her words, to beat it back with her measuring stick. And all of the data that she was measuring was telling her that her way of living was more likely to separate her from other people and from happiness. Instead of going back to the data, Brené Brown went into therapy. In her book, The Art of Gathering, Priya Parker writes about how authenticity enables group trust and group depth. She argues that how a gathering of human beings is designed determines individuals' capacity to be authentic in it. In one story in the book, Parker writes about her experience at the Harvard Kennedy Graduate School, where the modus operandi was a smiling perfectionism. People were constantly trying to impress, outsmart, and one-up each other, rolling out their accomplishments like polished arguments. Parker wrote that one of her graduate classmates, Lisa Lazarus, had the gall to suggest that this was a lonely and miserable way to learn. Lazarus then created a system of small group reflection circles that she called Change Agents Now, in which 6 Kennedy School students would agree to meet each other every other week for 3 hours and be real. Lazarus modeled these circles on author and Harvard Business School professor Bill George's concept of crucible moments, moments that shape who we are and transform the way that we understand the world. Instead of continuing to pretend like everything was perfect and super easy, Lazarus invited her classmates to talk about a time that they had struggled and how that time had changed them. She deliberately invited people into authenticity through the doorway of vulnerability. Parker signed up for one of the small groups, and she wrote that it changed her experience of graduate school. The school became a different kind of a place for me, she wrote. Armor fell off, ears widened, and mouths shrank. We learned to love one another for our flaws. The naval officer whose father was once homeless, the entrepreneur who grew up poor, the executive director who, in light of an absent father, became a second parent to her siblings. And rather than feel jealous or intimidated by their accomplishments, I began to feel empathy for them because I understood their stories, just as they understood mine. As a result of the small group, Parker also began to take vulnerability risks outside of the group because of her experience in it. She was building her vulnerability and courage muscle through practice, practicing taking risks and also witnessing other people take those risks with her. So what comes first? Is it the careful design and shared practice of deep listening in a community that builds trust in order to enable vulnerability from an individual? Or is it an individual's practice of letting themselves be vulnerable that drops the anchor deeper in community and creates more space for everyone to share vulnerability? A lemniscate is a geometry term for a plane curve that meets in the center. When graphing a lemniscate, the curves mirror each other as they move out from the center and then loop around and come back in to meet in the middle again. Some people call this sideways figure 8 lemniscate the devil's curve, because of its similarity to a juggling game called Diabolo. The chicken or egg game of vulnerability is similar to a devil's curve, as each effort brings us deeper individually or creates the bonds of trust in community. Those efforts reach out and loop around and come back in towards connection, reinforcing each other's growth. Brown's research showed that in order for individuals to feel worthy and have a strong sense of belonging, those individuals have to let themselves be vulnerably seen. Parker's work showed that in order for individuals to take the risk of being vulnerable, groups need to set themselves up to hold and gather stories. Each time an individual stretches that courage muscle and risks vulnerability, it creates more safety and more trust in the group. And when groups set themselves up to make space for people's authentic stories and prepare themselves to witness each other's realness, more space is made for individuals to stretch into their own vulnerability. This vulnerability dance is the divinity in the devil's curve. In my class, back in seminary, I knew that I didn't feel comfortable opening up in a space where one of my classmates was sitting in a place of judgment. My teacher, however, knew that my classmate was judging herself most harshly and first, and that all the outward projections of blame were coming from an inner struggle for worthiness. Instead of trying to correct her, he reassured her again and again that she was loved and she was worthy. And he had the rest of us show up and witness her imperfections and then respond to them with acceptance. He gave her the tools to investigate and develop her own sense of worthiness through self-reflection. In 3 months of that class, 3 months, I watched this woman slowly change her mind about herself. She moved from self-judgment to self-compassion, accepting her own imperfections and slowly opening up to vulnerability with the rest of us. Eventually, she told us that her judgment came from deep insecurities about her own worth. In the process of being held and witnessed in that fear and doing her own work on it, she blossomed. Her shoulders dropped down her back and she started smiling and then laughing. She started caring about the people around us, being able to show up for the rest of the class and witness us in our own struggles with compassion. This work was not easy for her. There were tears and fear, and she struggled. But at the end of those 3 months, she came to the conclusion that she was worthy. She was worthy of connection and belonging, and in that moment, she found it. She found it with us. We became her community, and she also found love in the world. She had spent years of her life alone, and that year, after that class, she met someone, fell in love, and got married. She was happy and kind to the people around her, and she had finally found her sense of belonging in that 8-shaped divinity between a group that could hold her vulnerability and her own acceptance of her imperfection. Dear ones, my prayer is that you too know that you don't have to be perfect to be loved. May you find a place here that can hold your vulnerability and your authenticity, and may you know that you are worthy. I pray that you will be able to slip into that track between your own self-compassion and the bonds of trust and community witnessing you, and find the belonging that you deserve. May it be so.
Every week, we have an opportunity to practice our values throughout sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all the non-pledge cash in our offering plate with a community organization. In this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. Today, we share the plate with Trickleby Cafe. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offer will now be gratefully received.
Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in our responsive reading printed in your orders of service. This is adapted from an interview with Paulo Coelho on Being. It's called Love is Magic. I'll begin. Love is a magic bridge that allows us to cross from this visible world. I'm talking to you and you can hear my voice. Emotions are something that we can't see, we can't touch. The most important one being love. You cannot make people understand love with their minds alone. You are a manifestation of love. If you know this, you will learn to trust other people. From the moment I was not scared of manifesting my love, will you join us in singing our closing hymn, number 18, What Wondrous Love Is This?
Would it be helpful